Today on Locked On Red Wings, we give you our prospect hopes for this season and long term.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the Daily J, a WWJ News Radio podcast. Well, Scotty's a host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. Scotty, happy Labor Day, buddy. It's a Labor Day episode.
Labor Day, man. Yeah, nice. Nice. I mean, it was getting a little chilly there, the last week, and now, it's going to be 90 for Labor Day. So just as history wants it to be. I don't know where I was going with that, but expected weather for Labor Day. It'll be nice. Hope everyone has a good one.
Yeah, well, I hope so too. And then also, Scotty, we're going to kind of continue. I put a feeler out there on Twitter the other day because we're in this weird period where the season's starting to get closer, but we've also kind of burned through a lot of our off-season content. So I went to you guys to give us ideas so we can do our job. And you guys came through. So appreciate that. We're going to kind of meld two of the ideas that you guys sent in on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. The luck game wanted us to talk about, what prospects not succeeding would shake our confidence in the Yzer plan. And then Emmett Ferguson wanted us to talk about what we wanted prospects to do in their seasons this year. And now the Red Wings have a lot of prospects because they've had a lot of draft picks over the years. So we picked 8 prospects that we felt would have the possibility of having the biggest impact on the Detroit Red Wings going forward. 8, excluding the guys we talked about last week. We talked about Kasper, Edvinsson, and Soderblom. So we're going to talk about 8 different prospects in those guys. If you want to hear our thoughts on those guys, go back to listen last week. We kind of combined those and just talked about our hopes for these prospects this season and our hopes for them long term. And the 8 guys we picked are Nate Danielson, Axel Sandin Pellikka, William Wallander, Albert Johansson, Carter Mazur, Amadeus Lombardi, Sebastian Cossa, and Cross Hannes. There are other great prospects the Red Wings have, but just we'd be here for 2 weeks if we wanted to do that, and we don't have 2 weeks left before prospects tournament starts. So we're going to try and cover these 8 guys. We're going to get through as many as we can today. Whatever we have left, if we have any left, we'll do on Wednesday. Scotty, was that explanation clear?
Yeah, I think so, man. Yeah, it's just kind of where everybody fits in the organization, this year and long term, because I think those are, A, 2 different conversations, but B, I think that there's some pretty fascinating conversations about the long-term kind of expectations and fit for a lot of these guys.
Yeah. And so, Scotty, I listed off the 8 guys that we want to talk about. Again, Edvinsson, Kasper, Soderblom, we covered last week. Which guy do you want to lead off with? I'll give you the pick.
Wow. That's an honor. Let's do... You want to do the new guys from this draft?
Nate Danielson and Axel Sandin Pellikka? Sure thing, man.
Yeah.
Which one you want to do first?
Let's do Axel because his name rocks.
His name does rock. There's a lot. Red Wings we should add Red Savage in here just because his name rocks too.
Yeah, true. That's
Michigan
true.
State now. There's some expectations there.
Right.
Anyways, Axel Sandin Pellikka, though. Let's stick with, let me keep my mind in the right spot. I just realized I don't even have his page pulled up. Wow, I am a fake fan. Where is he? Is he not even listed on here? All right, hold on. Scotty, you lead us off, buddy.
Well,
he's not even on Cap Friendly.
You want to start with, we can start with this season's expectations. Obviously, defenseman taken in this year's draft. I think, starting with the players that were the 2 guys that we're going to talk about that were drafted this year, the short-term conversation is quite a bit easier just because it's obviously these guys aren't going to fly through and be in winged wheels this season. So you're just looking for solid player development. And I think that if you can be in a position where at the end of this season, you're optimistic about, if you're maybe optimistic is not the right word. If you're confident about where they're going to start their season next year, wherever that ends up being, if as long as you're like confident in, okay, like this player did, well enough to kind of solidify himself in again, whatever league it ends up being based on their play, then I think that that's kind of a successful season. I don't have like too much of a like this needs to happen for this player, for these two guys this season for it to be like a success. I'm just looking for, flashes of why we drafted them in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, he was 17th overall pick, so him having been a first round pick obviously comes with expectations, but being like a middle of the round, like a lot of guys outside the top 10 take several years to develop to a point where they're ready for the NHL level. So this year, last year rather, he graduated to SHL. He played 22 games. I mean, the expectation for Sandin Pellikka this year is to continue to develop your game in Sweden. You're 18 years old, play full time in the SHL, don't get demoted, and prove that you have some impact. Red Wings have had a lot of luck these last couple of years with players in the SHL. Marco Kasper was really good. Seider was good in the year they loaned him to the SHL. Raymond obviously was very good. So, the expectation here is just continue to develop your game and, become one of the better players in the SHL before you come over. I wouldn't even be surprised if he plays next year in the SHL. It could be a couple years before he even comes to North America. He's only 18 years old.
Well, that was my point too, is like if at the end of this season you're looking around and you're like, okay, like he did amazing, like next season he's going to come and play somewhere in North America. Like obviously that'd be a big success, but if you're confident and you go like, oh, like he did well, but he's like 19, like I'm still fine with him playing in the SHL another year, then that's also a win. The only, I guess it's easier to word like what not a successful season is, and that would be after the year, if to your point, like he were to have to whatever, like get what, like the team, I guess, like doesn't succeed and he's not a big part of it and he's not getting playing time, or he has to move,
to the
teams
J20.
Like move down, like that would probably be like a failure, I guess. But like even that, like I don't know, I have a really hard time looking at like 18-year-old kids that are drafted and like if he struggles in his first year as part of the organization, I'm not going to be like there's very little he could do for me to be like I have zero optimism about this player. Like
just
short term's tough.
Short term is just grow your game and be impactful. That's really what it is, because you're so young and you're so raw still. Long term, I think that the want for him is to probably be a second pair offensive defenseman you can put on the power play to score some goals. Hopefully he can shore up the defensive side of the puck as well, because you drafted him as like a play driving defenseman. If you can shore up his defensive side and kind of develop a two-way game, that'd be fantastic too. But I mean, long term, that's the hope, I think, is he is a second pair goal scoring defenseman who can drive your power play.
Yeah, agreed. I don't really have too much to add. Like it's tough with, I think that's, starting with these guys is, I don't know, they're quicker conversations because it's like we don't know yet. We gotta see them play at all.
Yeah.
Like we've seen like tape and highlights of their draft year and whatnot, but like we gotta see them actually perform now as adults as part of the Red Wings organization. So I think long term, if he kind of files in as a second pair D man and is a play driving type of player back there, and like you said, isn't a liability on defense, that's kind of the mold that I think they're going to try to shape him as. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on now to talk about Nate Danielson. We'll get him in real quick before we get to our break. Nate Danielson was the Red Wings' other big draft pick this year. He was taken 9th overall by the Detroit Red Wings, signed his ELC. He's the captain of the Brandon Wheat Kings, one of the captains. I think they have co-captains there. He had played 68 games last year and had 78 points. Connor Bedard went out of his way to mention him as a very underrated player, that he was threatened, like not threatened by like, physically, but like was a threat on the ice.
He was terrified of.
Yeah. He kept sending him text messages, threatening him. But if Bedard's going out of his way to say something, positive about an opposing captain, then you got someone special. Scotty, what are we hoping for out of Danielson this year? He's going back to the WHL, I believe.
Correct. Yeah. I think this is one where, again, like, I guess not to reiterate the same point, but like at the end of the year, if you're confident that next year he won't be in the WHL, I think that that's a win. Yeah,
I think that is really what it is. Just dominate the WHL again, have a similar season to the one you had this past year. You got to remember too, he's a little bit older. I believe he was on the older end of his draft class, a September 27th birthday. So he'll be turning 19 here very shortly, actually. So he's got an extra year for size and growth compared to some of the other people. And I hope that he goes out there and just absolutely dominates, the WHL with the Wheat Kings. But I mean, outside that, like with these guys who are so young, there's not much else you can say besides just develop and get better and prove that you can be a center in the NHL someday.
These guys are still so far away from the NHL that like the conversation about what you want from them this year is pretty short. But, I think long term, I mean, if you can get a middle six center out of him, I think that's a massive win.
Absolutely. Long term, middle six center. Agreed. Scotty, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we will talk more about some of these other prospects. We can talk about Sebastian Cossa. I feel like that's going to be a name that people want to hear us talk about. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about AG1. Our next partner, AG1, is the daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. You got to drink it every day. Give AG1 a try because it is a foundational nutritional supplement that delivers comprehensive nutrients to support whole body health. AG1 replaces your multivitamin, probiotic, and more in one simple drinkable habit. Science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food sourced superfoods. AG1 is raising the standard for quality in the supplement category, and it helps you build your health foundation first. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL Network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL Network. Check it out. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are talking about prospects, our hopes for this season and long term. Sebastian Cossa, Scotty. It's been well documented this past year. He played a little bit in the Grand Rapids Griffins, didn't look too great. Got sent down to the ECHL, the Toledo Walleye. Started off very rough, but eventually found his groove and came to dominate the league. Really, he and John Lethemon were fantastic for the Toledo Walleye this year, taking them on a pretty deep playoff run. Statistically speaking, they were both solid. I believe John Lethemon even earned himself a contract at the end of the season and then another contract going into this season because he played so well. But we're talking about Cossa. Cossa had a .913 save percentage by the end of the year in 46 games played. He had a .917 save percentage in 7 playoff games with the Toledo Walleye in the ECHL. This is a really interesting one, Scotty. When it comes to my expectations for Sebastian Cossa, it would be take reign of the starter net in Grand Rapids. Like there is a goalie competition happening in Grand Rapids this year with John Lethemon because he's contracted. You got obviously Alex Lyon, Sebastian Cossa. Do they still have Jan Bednar? I'm that one's leaving my.
I don't remember, but I feel like we talked about that.
I know, right? My point being, even
I feel like we used to know the answer to that question.
Right. But it's pretty much going to be Lyon and Cossa with Lethemon biting at their heels for the playing time in that starters net in Grand Rapids or just playing time in general in Grand Rapids. And it's a very competitive net down there this year as compared to last year when it really wasn't, but no one really wanted the nets. So hopefully our hope for Sebastian Cossa this year is he can take what he learned in the ECHL and it translates to the AHL and he becomes a dominating force in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, I don't know if my if like he needs to dominate. Like I don't know because like if he dominates, then we're having a conversation about him being like in the NHL on opening night next season. Like if he dominates throughout the entire year like that, I think that kind of speeds up the timeline a little bit than maybe some people's expectation, or maybe that's just my own expectation and that's not shared with a lot of people. But I do agree with you that I think a successful season this year would be him just like taking the starting job, like solidifying the starting job down there. I think that would be a nice step. And then next season, if he's starting off in the AHL, like he's still so young, you know what I mean? Like if he's starting off in the AHL next year and then next year's the year he goes from starter to like one of the better goalies in the A, and kind of like whatever the word you want to use, dominates and puts up really, really good numbers, then you're having a conversation like mid-season next year about like, when is this dude going to be here? But I don't expect that conversation to happen this year. So I'm not like holding my breath on him just like lighting up the AHL. But if he can solidify himself as the starter, then I think that's a successful season for sure.
Yeah, maybe.
And if he fails to do that, then that obviously, kicks the can down the road and the timeline changes again.
Yeah, maybe I was a little bit overzealous when I said he has to dominate. I guess in my mind, what I mean by dominate is be like consistently good, not like 927, 930 save percentage, but like a nice 910 save percentage with the Grand Rapids Griffins and being the bona fide starter, at least the 1A starter. By the way, Jan Bednar did sign a 2-year contract with the Grand Rapids Griffins in March.
I was going to say, I swear we talked about this.
So
like,
there's a big competition happening in Grand Rapids this year. That one, like the name Jan Bednar popped in my head and I was just like, where is he anyways? What's going on with him? It's like, because he's not signed by the Red Wings, but he's signed by the Griffins. So, but yeah, Sebastian Cossa, I'm right there with you. I think he needs to have a good season. He doesn't have to dominate, but he has to have a good season with the Griffins, because long term, the hope for Sebastian Cossa is starting goaltender for the Detroit Red Wings. And if he doesn't pan out, like I would go as far as say like Cossa kind of has to pan out. And I know that, Steve Yzerman has kind of hedged his bets a little bit by drafting Augustine in the second round. He's a very talented goalie coming out of the United States National Development Program. But the Red Wings, I don't think Ville Husso's it long term. I love him. I think he's very good. But I don't necessarily think he's the solution. Obviously, Reimer's not. He's 35 years old. Alex Lyon's not. It has to be Cossa. So I would go as far as say Kossa's like one of those guys you have to have succeed if this team's going to have success. So that one long term, he's got to be a starting goaltender at the very minimum at the NHL level. Like there's a lot of weight on his shoulders, but luckily, because goalies develop weird, there's a lot of patience with him. So this year, even if he's good in Grand Rapids, he might still be in Grand Rapids next year to start. So there's time for him to develop.
Yeah, I think he will be in Grand Rapids next year to start. I would be shocked if he was anywhere else. Yeah, I mean, definitely, if you're looking at the roster right now, without a doubt, like if you had to pick one person to be like, who is going to be, like who should be, not even is going to, who should be the long-term 1A goalie for this team, I think most people, if not everyone, is going to pick Cossa. I don't know. Like we've had this conversation. We had it just before we got on air. Like I'm not really sure I subscribe to like anybody like it needs to. Like I'm not sure if like there will be other drafts and like other free agency periods. Like it's not like if Cossa doesn't turn out, there will be no opportunity to get a goalie ever again. Like I'm not sure they like.
But you can't really afford to restart the clock, on development.
Restart what clock? The goalie clock, I guess maybe. But
that's what I mean.
I mean, I guess, but again, like free agency exists, like, and not that free agency is a loaded, like, there wasn't any like high end caliber goalies this year, like, not that that's a guarantee, but like, there, I don't know, like it's not impossible to add, like trades exist, like it's not and we have a deep farm system, like you could, I don't know, I don't subscribe to like if Cossa doesn't turn out, then like the Wings are just never going to have a good goalie and they're just kind of like permanently hosed. Like, I don't know if it's like that dramatic, but it certainly is like a big deal. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's just like nothing either. I mean, if he doesn't turn out and end up being a 1A, you have to go find one. And that's going to become as big of, or honestly, maybe even bigger of a need than like goal scoring was this past offseason, right? Like where, you brought in DeBrincat, you got your top end goal scorer. Like that's going to pretty quickly become a massive need if Cossa doesn't turn out. So yeah, it certainly would be a big deal, but I think it's like recoverable. I don't think it's like, the Wings are just never going to be a good team if Cossa doesn't turn out.
See, I agree in part, but I disagree in another part. There are certain prospects that this team, like if we're to succeed in Larkin's contract, because you have to look at this 8-year window that Larkin signed as the Red Wings window to succeed, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to win a Stanley Cup while Larkin's in his prime. You're building your team around Larkin. There are certain guys I would subscribe to say you need to pan out if this team's going to have success. Sebastian Cossa, I would argue, is probably the guy, because yes, there are, like, Colorado Avalanche are a great example of a team that won the Stanley Cup with just kind of mid goalies last year, because they were great everywhere else. But a lot of times your championship can be kind of determined whether or not you have a hot goalie or a good goalie. Sergei Bobrovsky took the Florida Panthers all the way to the Stanley Cup because he got hot at the right time. Jonathan Quick famously did it in 2012. Like, you need a goalie. And I guess the counterpoint you could make is that those goalies, well, Quick's like a Hall of Fame level goalie, but Bobrovsky was just kind of whatever all season long until he got hot. But like Andrei Vasilevsky is a Vezina caliber goalie every year. He led the Tampa Bay Lightning to 2 Stanley Cups. You need a good goalie if you're going to have success in this league. For the most part, there are exceptions, obviously. Like I said, the Colorado Avalanche, but 9 times out of 10, it's going to be goalie. And that's why, to me, like, if you're going to have success, Larkin's in his prime, you need Cossa to pan out, because you can't really afford to restart the timeline on a new goalie prospect. Like, yeah, you have Trey Augustine as a backup plan, but that clock's starting over again. It could be another 4 years until he's ready to play in the NHL. And then, like, yeah, you could go out in the free agent market and do it, and like get some middle ground goalies, because you don't want to overpay. Like, as much as Bobrovsky carried them to the finals this year, how much of an albatross has that contract been?
Right. Yeah.
So I think Cossa is probably number one in terms of impactfulness towards this rebuild. Other guys we talked about already, but I think Edvinsson does need to pan out. I don't think it's as impactful as Cossa, because they have so many good defensive prospects, but Edvinsson is like the number one. If he pans out and he's like a bona fide top pair, second pair two-way defenseman, defensive defenseman, whatever you want to call him, this team's a lot better. So I would subscribe to the fact that I think there are a couple prospects that this team desperately needs to pan out if this team's going to have success while Larkin's in his prime. Raymond and Seider, although they're not prospects anymore, are another great example of Yzerman draft picks that have got to be borderline, if not like, not elite. Seider might be elite. Raymond probably isn't, but at least be like top line or all-star caliber players, because this team needs that. It just that's how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, like, no, it's a fascinating conversation. I think for me, like, Seider is probably the one.
Yes.
Like, if anyone has to be like turn into a top end, like elite, high end caliber at their position, like, for this thing to work, it's probably him, just because there's probably no one waiting in the wings that's going to turn into like,
nice.
Funny. That's like turning into that, like an elite high end defenseman on the blue line. And those are hard to come by in the free agent market. I guess you could say the same thing about high end goalies, but that he's probably the one. It's just like, it's really difficult for me to put so much stock in the future of the franchise on a guy who has played like 30 games in the AHL. Like, that's just like that's like, I understand like draft position, and they traded up to get him, and he was a first round goalie. Like, I understand all the value around like what he should be and what the expectation is between the front office and the fan base of him becoming is. But it's really hard for me to look at a guy who's played like 30 games in the AHL and be like, yeah, if you're not, like a top end, like bona fide 1A goalie, like this entire franchise is just hosed and we're never going to win anything. Like, that's like a crazy mindset to me. Like, there's so many other ways to acquire talent, and like, yeah, developing a goalie in the Larkin window, there's a chance that goes out the window. Like, if Cossa doesn't hit in the next like 3 years, like there's certainly a chance of that, but there's just so many other ways to acquire like talent that it's really hard for me to just put like the entire weight of like this franchise on Sebastian Cossa. That just seems like dramatic.
Well, yeah, there are other ways. It's not just like set in stone, but those ways are much more difficult then
they're
like if
risky
you're
too, for
trying
sure.
to build a team, like doing it that way is more difficult. That's why Eiserman is trying to do it the right way through the draft. So
For
that's
sure.
why I do think that they're, and we need to take a quick break here and then get on to, I guess, one more prospect. But like that's why I do think that Sebastian Cossa, there is probably a lot of weight on those shoulders in terms of the
I'm
rebuild
sure
season.
there is. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's like easy breezy and, if he doesn't pan out that like it's just super easy to fill the spot. It's going to be an uphill battle. The path of least resistance is certainly him turning out, and
Yeah.
I also think he will. Like this conversation is, like we're going back and forth on what we both like Kosa and think that he's going to be good. So this is more of a, like hypothetical and like philosophical, I guess, conversation than anything else, just on like how to build a roster. But the path of least resistance and the path that would benefit the Wings the most is certainly just him turning out for sure.
Yep. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get to one more prospect, and then we'll let you go. We'll cover the other four in Wednesday's episode. So stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, we have to talk about Wallander, Johansson, Mazur, Lombardi, or Hannes. What do you want to talk about?
I think that the shortest conversation in that group is Lombardi. So let's do that.
Okay. Amadeus Lombardi, obviously last year lit it up in the OHL with the Flint Firebirds. He had 102 points in 67 games, 45 goals, and 57 assists. Just goal scorer through and through, and 57 assists too. Like, just the guy has the talent for getting it in the back of the net and helping his teammates get it in the back of the net.
Yeah.
The biggest downside to Amadeus Lombardi, and people will say it, is his size. 5'10", 165 pounds. He did finish the season with the Grand Rapids Griffins, playing 2 games and registering 1 assist. The expectation for him this season, play in Grand Rapids, put some muscle on, and show us a little bit of what you showed in the OHL. Just have some of that translate. I'm not saying he has to light up the AHL, but like show us that you can do it at this level as well.
Yeah, I think that's really the biggest thing, is just proving that he belongs in the A. Like I really think that that's kind of what we're expecting. If he just looks completely overwhelmed, and we're even talking about a like demotion at some point, then like that's obviously not great, just because the changing, man, like people really, it's not like always linear, man. And I know that we say that on the show all the time, but like there's it's not just like, oh, I did really well in this league, so then I'll move up and surely I'll do really well in the next one. Like that's those are in place. Those like systems and promotions and demotions are in place for a reason. It's to thin out the crowd and figure out who can keep climbing and who doesn't. Just because you're really good at one league doesn't mean you automatically like eventually will be really good at the next one, or
Remember
else everyone
Thomas
would just
Yurko?
yeah, like, or if that was the case, everyone would just be like a really good NHL player. Like that's just like not how development works. So yeah, I think just he doesn't need to put up 160 again, certainly. But if he can just go there and just prove that he's like he belongs, put up some solid production,
Put on a little muscle.
Say that again.
Put on a little muscle.
Yes, obviously put on some muscle and some weight, absolutely. And just not look too small, literally and figuratively out there. I think that would be a win. I again, as long as we're not talking about like, oh man, this is too much of a jump for him, we got to talk about a demotion again, then I think we're probably talking about a successful season. And then I think next year is the year for him specifically that you're kind of talking about, like, all right, like let's see this dude really take a big step forward and kind of start lighting up the AHL.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like when it comes to expectations with him, he's a 4th round draft pick. So like if he pans out, kind of like Elmer Soderblom, if he pans out, 2 thumbs up, great draft pick.
Fantastic.
But if he doesn't pan out, I'm not going to be too heartbroken because, when you get a guy in the 4th round, expectations are already kind of like how many 4th round picks pan out long term, right?
Yeah.
So this season, if he's just proves he can belong, I will be super pumped for his development. Long term, if he makes it to the NHL, and is a regular NHL player, that alone is a huge win. Even if it's like on the third or fourth line.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
love
Oh, yeah.
I love Amadeus Lombardi. I'm really
We know.
excited for him, but also I understand like you got to keep your expectations a little bit. I keep wanting to say mitigated. I don't know if that's the right term to use, but it'll work in this instance. So
Yeah, you just got to keep them reasonable. Yeah,
reasonable. Thank you.
it's I agree with you. Long term where he fits, like this is certainly not like the franchise. Like this is not, the conversation we just have about Cossa certainly does not apply
Mhm.
to Lombardi. Like if he doesn't turn out, then the player development line keeps moving and they'll just try to find the next guy to kind of inject some optimism into people. But I think that a lot of people are rightfully really excited about him, and I think that he does have the skill to be a solid NHL player. And like you said, even if that is like a bottom six forward, that would still be a big win as far as drafting goes and as far as player development goes. So yeah, I think him fighting long term, kind of like if you can even get him up to like, oh, he's a solidified middle six guy, like that would be huge.
Yeah. That about does it. Scotty, got any final thoughts on any of these guys?
I don't think so. We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode on Wednesday. So stay tuned. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.